Is it gonna go? Man, this live stream thing is just crazy. I hope this is going. Anyways, how's everybody doing today? Um, it's very fascinating this last week. Um, as I've been paying attention to different stuff happening in the world, because there's a lot of it right now. Like, if you're not paying attention to what's happening around you, um, be more conscious of what's going on. Um, and not necessarily like the big national stuff, just the little things, because we can learn so much from our interactions with other people. Everybody asks me, Joe, where do you get your content from? Where do you figure out like what to talk about? And I just watch the world around me, my interactions with other people, with situations, things like that. So if you want to be a little more aware, right? And that's what I teach overall. Like, and then show my good friend, my number two, right here, $2 bill. Um, there's a lot I learned from money, and I constantly say, hey, it talks to me. I can talk back to it and understand like where people are at. It's fascinating, just watching what people do, and it's not always like apparent that it's like, oh my gosh, like this is how they're interacting with money, and this is a thing. Like there's some lines you have to draw, right? But pay attention with just that perspective of, hey, how are these people interacting? What choices are they making? And under the covers, what's it based on? It's not always money. I'm just being honest. Like I just focus on that because I use it as a great medium to find out what's really going on in people's lives. And for us all to make the impact we want, we need resources. Money's one of them because the world is like revolves around money. Like that's how commerce happens. But it's not always, right? Sometimes it's with relationships as well. Um, we know somebody that can get us an opportunity somewhere else, right? And so people are just as important as money. Time is another one, right? We have so many hours in the day, and people are like, oh, there's only so many hours. It's like this finite resource. But some people have figured out how to kind of do time hacks to make life more productive. And not in like, oh, I have to be busy 24/7, but just in a, hey, I can accomplish things pretty quick, right? So create systems in your life that help you like literally systemize the time you have so you can have more time. There's lots of little hacks. So pay attention, like overall, and I hope you're getting that through these videos that you're watching. I do send out newsletters once a week, and I hope that's helping, like to understand, like, hey, you can start looking at this different aspects. What am I doing? Follow the prompts in the newsletter. Uh, they're very helpful. They really are. I craft them in a way that's going to help you take little micro movements to really get where you're at. So if you just follow those, I mean, you could be pretty good. Um, anyways, that's a little off topic. Anyway, I just felt like I want to open with that today. Um, so this last week, so talking all that, right? This last week, I felt it's time to talk about boundaries again. Like, I love boundaries because, like, it's this cool thing, like, we can set up for ourselves. And then it's up to us to maintain those. And then when we do that, people freak out because we're like saying yes or no to things, and they're like, well, what? Like just a reaction. Like when you hold a boundary, and you're like, no, this is what I'm going to do, and just not be angry about it, not be like grumpy about it, not have to explain it, not to excuse it away, not have some expectation that the other person is going to respond how you want them to, but just like sit there and be like, no, this is what I'm going to do, or this is what I'm not going to do, and that's okay because that's where I'm at. Um, People have a tendency to like just really lose it sometimes. So it's fascinating to watch. And sometimes what happens is they try to push that off on you, right? We hold a boundary and they're like, oh no, that's like your thing, so you got to adjust and change. And it's like, no, I don't really have to. I just can be me. So, anyways, rolling back to like just talking about boundaries overall. Just kind of the pieces I want to talk about with this today because there's so many aspects of boundaries, right? To us setting and holding ideals that we want to live by. I mean, that's really what a boundary is. It's just a set of kind of um, guidelines and kind of commitments to ourselves to be like, hey, I want to interact with this way or I don't want to interact that way. I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. I won't do X, Y, and Z. And again, you don't have to explain away why the boundary's there. Just set it, hold it. Because us as humans have such a hard time when other people's experiences look different than ours. We want to feel like we belong, right? And that's what some of boundaries is. Like we want to like push our boundaries or make people feel like we feel, because then we belong. There's a belonging, a fitting in piece, right? That's inherent to like our nature, our soul. We don't want to be the odd man out. So what happens is our experience now has to be other people's experience, and they have to experience it the same way we do. Not say that happens all the time, but I see it a lot because of this programming, right? Because we don't want to be, because I don't know about you, but I remember a lot of times growing up, I felt like the odd kid out, right? I felt as a person that didn't really fit in. And I would look at like, it took me a long time before I felt comfortable even in my own family. And there's stories and all that, and maybe one day we'll get into all of that. But it took me a long time before I even had relationships with my own siblings. We're talking like into adulthood. I always just felt a little different. And I had some boundaries. Like, I wasn't going to share this story, but this is a funny one. So I'm like, I'm trying to think, like 9, 10, maybe 11, somewhere in that range, right? I just kind of remember my brother, like he's 3 years older than I am, and understanding like the age there. Anyways, he has this great idea because he wants to earn some money. Because in my house growing up, we want, like, my parents didn't have a lot. We had stuff. We did some extracurricular things, but if we wanted to do more, then we really had to make it happen ourselves. My brother, from a friend, found out like, hey, as a kid, right, at that age, you can get a paper route. You can make some money. Um, and so he called, got put on the list. And cool thing enough, like we ended up with a route like right around our house, which was, I mean, they tried to, coordinate it so as kids you didn't have to go too far. It wasn't too much pressure on the parents. So we had one that was within, um, you know, within our neighborhood area. It was a decent sized paper. I mean, we delivered, I don't know, a couple hundred papers each week. So it wasn't too bad. So anyways, so he gets the paper out. It's his paper out. And he decides that he needs help, right? Because it's too much for him. It takes him too long to fold them all and deliver. So he enlists my help. I'm like, cool, I can make some money. Yeah, let's do this. And I'm doing it for a couple months. Like, I don't know how long, like 6 months. We had the paper out forever. Seems like as kids, I don't know. Time back then is it's hard to tell how long we had it for. Anyways, so I'm going along. I'm doing it, and at this point in time, like I'm to the point where I'm folding half the papers. Right, we have the route split up almost 50-50, like in what who delivers, and it was based upon geographic areas. So sometimes like one person would have a couple more than the other person, just because it was off in that area and it made sense. Right, we were smart. We'd like set it up the routes efficiently, just like, hey, let's go get this done. So we come home, and it was afternoon papers. So we come home from school, fold the papers really fast, and then we go out and deliver them. So I'm doing this for a while. So, and I think in my mind, like, I'm doing half the work. I should have to pay. And that's how my brain was thinking back then. Like, I'm just like, let's do this. And so what I got, like, I didn't see the money side a whole lot. I'm just like doing the work. And again, I'm like 10, right? So it's like, I don't know, concept of money, I wasn't 100% there, but really looking back at it, I was quite savvy when it came to it. Like, I understood money, I understood like what we needed to do. So I'm like, I go to him one day, and and then so we did do this for a while, right? So one day, this is how it goes. So one day, sitting in the kitchen, I hear my mom talking to my brother about kind of like, savings and what's happening, and kind of talking like more the business side of the paper business, right? I mean, that's, you got to figure out like how much you save in, like, are you spending a little bit because you wanted some money to go spend on something. And through this conversation, I find out, right? Because I'm like the concept I didn't know is like how much we were making overall. I just knew what my cut was, and I was doing half the work. So my brain was like, well, I should be making half the money. Because come on, like in business now, I understand, but paper route business, like literally, we are the servants. Like it comes in, there's no extra responsibility. If I missed the paper on my route, I went and took it back. It's not like he was shouldering some type of extra responsibility. I just want to lay that out there. So anyways, so I find out this day, as back to the scenario, like my mom, my brother's sitting at the kitchen table, and I'm there and start hearing it, and I find out that I'm making a quarter of the profit. Okay, I'm doing half the work, and he's paying me a quarter of what he's making. So he's pocketing 75%. And so I'm like, my little brain kicks in. I'm like, yeah, that's not fair, right? I set this boundary to be like, that's not fair, and I want more. And not in like, I'm gonna be like blah blah blah. Like you can't, like that's not like I did throw like a temper tantrum, but I remember very clearly. I'm like, that's not fair. I want 50%. I'm doing 50% of the work. I should get 50% of the pay. And my mom was on his side. And he's like, no. He's like, but it's my paper route. My mom's like, it's his paper route, and he can pay you what you want. And I'm like, that's cool, right? So they set a boundary. There's a boundary there. I set mine, right? I want 50%. They set theirs to be like, no, it's his paper route. So if you're going to help, you're going to get paid that much. And it was 25%. And that was my only form of income. Like I'm 10 though, 10, 11, you know. So my options aren't really great for what I can go do to make more money. But guess what? I had a boundary and I kept it. It was 50% for 50% of the work. And there was no way, like my brain level, the efficiency I saw and how we had it set up, there wasn't only way to cut back to do 25% of the work for the pay. Like we had it set up and it didn't make sense. So after like a week, I said, okay, you got a week. Like we'll figure it out. Set the boundary. They set the boundary. Right? We do this all the time in life. So think of other times in your life where you do this. You set a boundary. They set a boundary, and then there's some negotiation that happens. Right? Can we move the boundary? Are we flexible enough to move the boundary? Because it happens at times. But when we look at like kind of that inner piece of ourselves, can we? Again, I'm going to go back to trust. Can we trust ourselves enough to hold our boundary? And not make it about the other people, but make it about us. That's the important part. Because the other people have their own boundaries. And if we cave to their boundaries, and it violates one of ours, then there's the whole conversation that I've talked to in the past about the toleration zone and all that. But if we look at it and be like, we're holding this, and drop the emotion too. Like, if emotion comes up, because it will, that's something we need to process and understand. Where does it come from? Is it triggering from something else? Some other time I set a boundary, then I violated myself. Because guess what? You are the only person who can violate your own boundary or allow it to happen. You are in control of your body, your actions, what happens to you for the most part. Okay? I know there are outside forces that can act upon us. That's a different story. But in this scenario with boundaries, you are the one. So you control, right? Or even when that boundary is violated, you control how you can respond. That's a power we have. There's a power but nobody taught us that we have. So after about a week of me continuing to say, I want 50% pay or I'm done. That's where it come to, okay? I'm like, I was smart enough back then to be like, this is not fair. My boundary is this. So if I'm not making 50%, then I'm done. And I still remember my brother saying, he's like, no, you're not. You're going to keep doing it. Like, just kind of, in my family, that's kind of thing. Like, there was a lot of like, you have to do things because we're all doing it. So if one's suffering, everybody must suffer. That was kind of the mantra of my family. If we're out doing yard work, everybody's out there doing, at least the boys, right? Nobody got out of stuff. Boundaries were violated all the time in my family. And that still rolls over to adulthood too. It's taken me a long time to be very good at being like, no, that's okay. You guys go do that. And not feel the shame and guilt that they're trying to push on me, right? There's an aspect of that. So anyways, let's finish my story up. So back to the story. So after a week of me saying I want 50%, he's like, nope, you're not getting it because it's my business. I'm like, my older self would have told 10-year-old self to be like, that's cool, that is his business. So tell him to go find a new employee. I didn't say that. But I said, okay, I'm done. Literally, on the like fifth day, we get home from school. It's time to go do all the work. And he's like, I'm like, 50% pay, and I work today. And he's like, nope, you still know only 25. I mean, he just like he held to his boundary. I applaud him for that. I held to mine too. And we couldn't find negotiation to bridge that gap. So, guess what? I had to deliver papers that day. And oh, my brother was pissed. He was so grumpy. But hey, that's cool. That's his problem, not mine, right? Because I held to my boundary. And I bet it was, man, I remember taking a long break. Every day after school, man, he'd push me to every day. And I'm like, nope, not going to do it. And I'd go play with my friends and do other stuff while he was working. It took him probably 2 or 3 months before he finally conceded and said, okay, I'll pay you half if you come back and do this. Because he was tired of doing like the whole route. I guess like 2 hours of work, maybe 3 after school. Like, you know, you would start, and in the wintertime it was brutal because you get home from school, and then by the time you get done delivering papers, it was dark. No time for play, no time for friends. And it started to cost him. So what was that boundary worth to him? And in the end, it wasn't worth holding on to the value of money. It was worth having the help. Because he was getting done, he was enjoying life more because he conceded. But see how he kind of held and set his boundary around money. Like, I just want to touch on that last piece. Or sometimes when we do that for money, we're like, oh no, I have to make X amount of money. Instead of when we look at what we have in life and what we're doing and the impact we want to make, what's more important, the money we're getting or the impact we're making? Now, I'm all about making profit. I'm all about you living your best life and getting the money you want. Sometimes you have to look at, and this touches a little bit on the values, right? What's the impact you want to make? Because sometimes those boundaries you got to set up, and the structure you want to set up and what you want to do is if the impact you want to make is more important than the money you want to make, which I hope it is, because the money will always come, I promise. Then you have to look and be like, don't base your decisions off the money and what's coming and going. Be smart about business. But really look and set that boundary on the impact you want to make and go for it. Because as you make that impact, again, the money, the people, your time even will increase. And that right there ends up being the most important thing you can do. Because at the end of the day, when you're gone, people remember what you did, not how much you had in your bank account. People remember how it was when they interacted with you, not what you had. So look at your boundaries this week. Check them out and be like, where am I holding so firm that I might be like missing out on opportunities, or where am I holding firm and I'm feeling good, but I'm feeling a lot of emotion about it, right? Kind of check into those two areas. Because as you get better about holding boundaries, people will understand it and respect you and interact with you the way you want to be interacted with. And again, like I said, the boundaries don't have to be all like, well, no, this is my boundary, so stay away and push them away. Just be like, no, I can't do that. And it doesn't require any explanation, excuses around why you have that boundary. Just set it. And as people interact with you, they will start to honor those boundaries and quit pushing against them. Because at the end of the day, we do want to belong and fit in, but we don't have to violate those pieces of us that we really want just to do that. So look at your boundaries this week. I'd really like to know, like, share in the comments, like, where do you feel like you struggle the most with boundaries? Are there times when you're like, oh, I set this boundary, then I had like this falling out with somebody or something like that? It happens. But remember back to my story about the paper route, right? It was with a sibling. And it wasn't awesome for that short time. But we both came to the side where I wanted to be treated fairly and he needed help. And it wasn't to exploit him. It's just like that was my boundary and I was going to hold to it no matter the consequence. And I didn't make any money that time. But it came back. And then, I made more. So it's one example of what can happen through your life if you hold to that boundary and look at your values and how your values also kind of feed into where you're setting those boundaries and how you're interacting with people. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Hope you enjoyed this one. I love talking about boundaries. Also, if there's like specific topics or questions you have about money, say, hey Joe, like you talk about like this and the aspects, the attitudes of money, like around this aspect, like what does it mean go further? I'll go further. Like I just am sharing right now really what I see in the world and what I feel like will most help you out this week. but if something you really are dying to hear, post it in the group. That's the benefit you have of being in this group, is you can ask me questions and I'll respond. So with that, have a great week, and we'll see you back next week. Bye.